Retro.
Yeah.
Electro. Tech.
Oh yeah.
Hey, turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro Electro Tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Well, hello there once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electro Tech, and I'm going to be performing one of these marathon evaluations on this stack of Pioneer equipment, which was brought in by one customer. Well, she also brought in a CD player, but I want to stick with the Pioneer equipment first. This stuff has been stored away for many years, and she wants me to go through and just do an evaluation. Let her know where things stand as far as the function of each piece and what I recommend needs to be done. Now, I'm hoping I can get through this fast because I don't have a lot of time on my plate. I'm loaded down with equipment, so I just want to go through again, just pop the hood on these, take a quick look inside, make sure that there's nothing that stands out like a sore thumb, that is screaming warning, warning, do not power up, something like that. Otherwise, we'll go into a safe power up and then the usual function testing. I'm hoping that for her sake I can get through this quick because again I don't have a lot of time. So this isn't going to be deep dive servicing. For example, with the turntable, I'm hoping I could just go in at most, maybe just a little bit of light cleaning, a little light relubrication of some of the mechanism as needed, where needed. Maybe a new stylus, cartridge, for example. We'll see what's going on with the cartridge, but probably a new stylus. Just clean things up, make sure it powers up safely, all that jazz. Now, the turntable is a Pioneer PL250 direct drive turntable, and so I just want to see if everything cycles okay and all that jazz. Well, at least the auto return. It's an auto return unit, so make sure the auto return is working and all that, and go from there. The next in line is a Pioneer TX410 tuner, so we'll see how that functions. The amplifier below that is a Pioneer SA510. So we'll see what's going on there. And then the cassette deck is a Pioneer CT-F615. So without further ado, let me get the bench cleared and bring in one piece at a time and start evaluating things, and we'll go from there. Okay, so first things first, starting with a safe power up, and let me click in the current limiter, the bulb that I want. And I'm just going to carry the tone arm over and it will start rotating if everything's okay. And sure enough, you can see there. And I didn't suspect there was going to be any problems with this, but you never know, and that's why we perform a safe power up. But the platter is rotating, that's good. And while I'm sitting here in this position, let me go ahead and walk the tone arm across the platter and just see if it's going to auto return. This isn't an auto return table, so let me carry it on over. Okay, yeah, so that's looking pretty good. Okay, and it's set down and shut off. All right. So next order of business, let me go ahead and check the stylus real quick. Check the status of that before I even attempt to play any vinyl. So I just pulled the stylus off. Let's go ahead and let me see if I'm in frame. Yeah, I'm in frame. So all I'm doing is I'm going to look at the cantilever and see if the stylus is intact, and no, it's not. There is no stylus on this cantilever. So okay, so problem number one. Now what I want to do real quick is just check the status of the cartridge and see if the cartridge is ohming out properly. Okay, so we're going to ohm out the right and left channels of this stereo phono cartridge. So let me go ahead and clamp my probes on. Okay. Start with our right side. Okay, and let me set this down and point the meter over to the, or point the camera over to the meter real quick. What are we reading about? 873 ohms on the right channel. Let me go ahead and, on this meter up here, and let me go ahead and read the other channel. And we should have thereabouts as well. 800 and something, close to our first reading. 800 and, yeah, let me establish a better connection here. 865. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and use that cartridge. I'm going to order a stylus to begin with. Now let's go ahead and check some other stuff. Okay, and hopefully you can see what I'm seeing. We're checking the speed control via the speed control, the strobe indicator there. And you'll notice this, let me see if I can get in here. You see the line that, you see this line here? The one that appears to not be moving. I mean, it's drifting a little bit. That's our 33 RPM speed, and it's looking pretty good. Now, if I was to mess around with our speed adjustment pot and kind of give it a little, you see how it starts moving? Okay. Now, I think the speed control pot needs to be cleaned, of course. It's pretty finicky. Now, let me go ahead and switch over to 45 RPM. And that's going to be our, let me see if I can get this camera positioned a little bit better. Okay, and you can kind of see this. You can kind of see this line right here that's kind of drifting around a little bit. Let me lock that in with our speed adjustment there. Yeah, that seems to be pretty good. Okay, that locked it in pretty good. Yeah, I think once I clean up this speed adjustment pot and all that, we're going to be good. So we're able to lock in our speeds. It's doing pretty good. Okay, so these are the controls here. These are the speed controls here. We have a cut switch over here. And my main focus is just getting inside, gaining access to the controls, solvent cleaning those, flushing them out multiple times, relubricating them. And otherwise, you can see I have the platter off. I just want to gauge how much dirt and debris has worked its way under the platter over time. There's some, but not too horrible. There's some dust, debris, a little fuzz and all that. I found a leaf under there. But anyways, once I open it up to gain access to the controls, I'll be able to gauge what's going on otherwise. I'm not anticipating anything outside the norm, being that everything is pretty much functional. It seems like the tone arm is doing okay. The tone arm, the tone arm base in terms of pivoting, there doesn't seem to be any sort of obstruction at all, any resistance to the movement of the tone arm as far as its pivot along its normal range of travel, obviously. So everything looks okay there. The cueing control seems to raise and lower okay, so that's all right. I'm sure that a matter of fact, okay, yeah, it seems to do all right. Yeah, never mind that. Without the platter on, it's gonna do its little thing, but so you can see that it lowers, it raises. So the cueing lever is working okay, and I'm not going to have to go into the tone arm base and do a deep dive there and mess around with the tone arm or anything, the cueing and all that. That seems to be fine, so good. And otherwise, yeah, once I get a stylus on here and clean these controls, and like I said, once I'm in there, I'll evaluate the state of everything else as far as the condition of the lubricants that I can visualize, that I can gain access to without having to, you know, do a deep dive and really disassemble things, because if I was to do that, that might get cost prohibitive. Maybe, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is I don't have to do that at this point. Again, get a stylus on board, do a little cleaning in there, a little light lubrication as needed, where needed. Mainly clean the controls, and this thing, you know, should be good to go, and that's about it. So let me go ahead and move on to the next piece of equipment. Alright, so here we are. I've got the cover off the amplifier, the SA510. So I'm going to do a safe power up. Everything looks okay in there. I really don't have time to go into a inspection on camera anyways. I looked in there and kind of peeked around, and if I end up doing more work to this, I'll go into a little bit deeper of an inspection, as I always do when I'm, you know, inside and I'm in there doing some work anyways. So everything looks pretty good. It's dusty, it's dirty, but other than that, I don't see anything that stands out like a sore thumb. The fuse is looking good. It's a correct fuse and everything's intact. So real quick, I'm going to power it up on the current limiter, which is, most of you know, that device up there with the light bulbs on it that limits current to this device under test, so that if anything was to go badly wrong as far as something inside shorts out, you know, we have something go down kind of nasty in the power supply, something draws heavy current, well, it's our hopes that the current limiter that I pointed to will limit that so as to prevent anything really catastrophic from happening. That's the extent of the explanation I'm going to give, because this is mostly for the customer. So the main thing is that I just want to show her what's functioning and kind of give her an idea, provided that everything does function. I don't know yet. So let me go ahead and start by performing a safe power up. Let me go ahead and kick in the bulb, and while I do that, I will, just for kicks, zoom in up here, and I'm going to pull in the small bulb all the way over to the left, and we'll see what there is to see. Let me scoot on over here. So there'll be an initial bright glow, and it'll dim down, or it should, if there's no problems. So let me do that. So I have a signal piped into the back into our auxiliary input. I have the scope probes on the outputs, the right and left channels. And to the customer, I have a signal going into this amplifier, okay, in place of music. It's just a steady tone. The music signal should come out right there, okay? So this device that we call an oscilloscope, you see the yellow line and the blue line? Well, those indicate the different channels, okay? So the blue is the right channel, the yellow is the left channel. So that would be like our speakers, okay? But we're not going to hear anything. We're going to see it instead of hear it. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is, let me bring up the volume just a little bit, because I have it on the current limiter still. So I'm just going to, little by little, you can see the line starting to wiggle and jiggle around, kind of do a little hula dance there, because I'm starting to bring up the volume. Alright. And there we go. We call those waveforms, and that's actually sound, okay? So let me go ahead, and the bulb is glowing kind of bright because I'm starting to bring up power. Let me go ahead and kick in another bulb. Okay, good. Give us a little bit more current to the device here, the amp. I'm going to turn up the volume just a little bit more. Okay, It's looking good. So that shows us that we have sound coming out of the amplifier, okay, on our right and left channels. So it's outputting. So if I had speakers attached right now, we would hear a tone. So we have output. That's a good thing, of course. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and start messing with some of the controls, like the tone controls, like the bass, the treble, and I'm going to mess around with the balance control, the volume control a little bit more. If there's noise in the controls, like for example, if the controls are dirty, which is very common, you'll see like static on those waveforms. You're going to see like just kind of crackly, staticky looking anomalies mixed in with those waveforms. So let me just go ahead and mess with it. You see that right there? Yeah, that's because the volume control is dirty and it needs to be cleaned, okay? It's getting jittery, it's jumping around. All right. Now our balance control, you can see it in the balance control too a little bit. You see that kind of staticky looking garbage in there? When I move it, the balance, yeah. That's all noise and that's no big deal. That's normal. Over time, these controls get dirty. Our loudness control, our tape switch, okay. Our treble, yeah, you can see the noise in the treble control as I turn it. You see that? All that noise. Okay. Yeah, so your classic case of dirty controls are bass. Bass isn't too bad. It's jittery. But anyways, and then the lines, those waveforms are going to go flat right now because I'm just messing around with the speaker control switch for A and B speakers. Okay. Just want to check the state of this control. Alright. Our subsonic switch. Yeah, all these controls are pretty dirty, okay? So yeah, our volume pot's really bad. So if we had speakers hooked up to this right now, you would hear a lot of static, a lot of crackle, and you'd hear the music cutting in and out, okay? So these controls are going to have to be serviced. Let me go ahead and back out of this now because I don't want to bore you to death. But so that's pretty much it. What you were looking at was, the music signal or a tone. You're looking at it on the screen there instead of hearing it. And I was working all the controls, the volume and all that, and you can see all the noise in them. And so I have to pull these controls out, the boards and all that, pull them out and solvent clean them with a chemical and flush them out, and then after I flush them out and everything dries out, then I'll add a little bit of lubricant back into the controls. Okay, so otherwise, just real quick, we're gonna just look in here real fast. Otherwise, everything is working. Once I get these controls all cleaned out and you start hooking your components back up to it, your turntable, your cassette deck, if the cassette deck works, we'll check that out in a minute, your CD player, all that. Once you start hooking things back in and putting your signal into this amp, you'll get music out of it. Now, as far as the reliability of this, I really don't know because, anything can happen at any time. It's an old piece of equipment. These here that I'm pointing at are called electrolytic capacitors, and this is the power supply section here. Sometimes it's good to change out these electrolytic capacitors because these have a tendency to go bad over time because they have a chemistry in them. The chemistry degrades, and just the way that they're made, their very nature, they can degrade over time and start to have problems, and bad things can happen as far as these things failing and causing damage and all that. Whether or not they're going to fail tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, or 2 years from now, I really don't know. But they could fail, and they could fail in a bad way. So sometimes I recommend recapping the power supply, because a power supply, obviously, well, it's a power supply, right? It's like the heartbeat of the unit. Well, it is the heartbeat of the unit. It's like your own heart. If your heart goes kaput, all done. Same thing with this. No power supply, nothing. So the power supply also, there's more electrical wear and tear going on in the power supply because, well, it's a power supply and there's more demand put on it. So it's a good idea to refurbish the heart of the unit and recap the power supply at the very least. So that's what I would recommend at the very least. And of course the amplifier section too, you know, there's those electrolytic capacitors in the amplifier section. The amplifier section is what makes the sound happen, that amplifies the sound, and there's more electrical wear and tear in those areas too. So if I was going to do any work here, at a minimum, I would recommend the power supply. If you want to go a little bit beyond that, well then the amplifier section would be good to really you know, bolster up the reliability a bit. But you can also do nothing at all other than have me clean the controls. The controls are going to have to be cleaned for sure to get all that noise out of them and intermittent behavior. But so at the very least the controls. The next thing I would say would be the power supply and then the amplifier section. It would be good to recap those areas. And recap meaning these electrolytic capacitors, okay? Because of their chemistry and the way that they break down, the way that they fail. They're known to be the more problematic components of everything. So it doesn't mean other stuff can't go wrong and other components and other parts don't fail. It's just that these are higher failure rate items. So there you go. So hopefully that wasn't too overwhelming of an explanation. So that's what I would recommend. And at the very least, like I said, I'm going to go in and service all these controls and gain access and pull the boards out and get to those controls and do that for sure. So I'll get with the customer on that and see how far she wants me to go and whatnot, what she's willing to do and what she's willing to pay for. So, but otherwise, this thing, after I clean the controls and all that and just clean the dust out of here, get all this crap straightened up, well then it may go on for some time. It may work for years to come. Who knows? So everything actually physically looks good in here, but that doesn't mean that there can't be problems. And by the way, to the customer, in regard to what looks good physically, sometimes, and not all the time, sometimes these caps can fail without any outward signs of problems. But sometimes they do show problems physically, like the can will start to bulge up at the top. They'll start to bulge, you know, showing signs of problems that, you know, they might vent open. There's vents on the top of some of them, and sometimes these things, when they fail, they actually blow apart, physically blow apart and blow their contents out of the vents. So I look for physical signs of problems like bulging. Sometimes around the bases of them, they actually will leak the chemistry I was talking about, the electrolyte. There'll be like leakage on the board. And I don't see any of that going on with these, but that doesn't mean that they won't fail. But I do look for stuff like that, physical signs of problems, things that look overheated and so forth. Now, beyond that, I'm not going to go into a big explanation as far as inspection details, but I just want to let you know that, and we'll go from there. So I'll talk to the customer more about this stuff, but anyways, I mean, everything's looking good. We got you know, signal going in, an amplified signal coming out. We have noise in the controls, but that's to be expected. But otherwise, this unit is working. Okay, and it looked good on the current limiter. There wasn't any funny behavior going on the current limiter, and there still isn't. I still have it on there, and whatever. So I'm going to monitor things for a while with this, and then move on. But otherwise, let's go ahead and get to the next piece of equipment. Okay, and now we are going to evaluate the Pioneer stereo tuner, the TX410. So the first thing I did was perform a safe power up. That went well, no problems there. The next $1 million question is the tuner pulling in radio stations? So starting with the FM, and really that's all I'm concerned about right at the moment. I wanted to tune onto a station. I have this hooked up to the scope. I also have a little test amplifier that I use for signal tracing and all that hooked up as well. So the first thing we're going to do real quick is just take a look over at the oscilloscope screen, and you see those You see those lines dancing around, our little waveforms dancing around? Okay, so that's the signal from the radio station. So there's either some music there or somebody's yapping away, talking, and all is good there. And to reinforce that fact, and remember, this is mostly for the customer. A lot of you folks out there that are following along that are more familiar with this, well, this is very elementary stuff, but again, I don't want to overwhelm the customer with too many technical details. So this little amp here, let me go ahead and turn it up.
Thank you for listening and hanging out with us this morning.
Okay.
9 o'clock.
All right, so I'm not going to camp out on that any longer than that because of the whole copyright thing and YouTube and all that. So, yeah. So it's pulling in stations. Now the next $1 million question is, and let me just kind of zoom in. Why don't we have the red stereo indicator light? So a couple things to consider real quick. And again, I'm going to keep this very simple for the customer, but also for those of you who like to follow along and just kind of vibe into this stuff and are interested in some basic troubleshooting. The first thing we want to find out is whether or not we're getting voltage, okay, to this red LED or LED. I think it just has a little red lens, but anyways, neither here nor there. But the LED that should light up and indicate that we are locked onto a stereo signal. Now to the customer, real quick, all that means is that the radio station, an FM station that transmits a stereo signal, well, when they do that, the tuner has to have the ability, of course, and all stereo tuners do, to decode or demodulate that stereo signal, okay? Now, if the circuitry that's involved in doing that, decoding, for lack of a better term, or actually demodulating that signal, excuse me, if that circuitry wasn't working appropriately to do that, that doesn't mean you wouldn't hear the broadcast. It's just not going to have the stereo separation that it normally would have if that circuitry is working appropriately. And if the circuitry is working, then that FM stereo indicator light should show that and indicate that by glowing, in this case, glowing red. Okay, so a couple of things could be wrong in that situation where it's not lighting up, or in this situation where it's not lighting up. Either the stereo broadcast from the radio station is not being decoded or demodulated because there's a problem with that circuitry, or there could be a connection issue between that circuitry and the indicator lamp, or the indicator lamp itself is just bad. So the way we check that right off the bat is just if that multiplex circuitry is doing what it's supposed to do, then it will provide voltage to that lamp. Okay, so if we have the voltage there and the lamp isn't lit, then we have a bad lamp. Okay, more than likely, unless again there's a connection issue or something like that. But I doubt if that's the case. I think what's going on here is that we just have a bad lamp. Because, and let me go ahead and change views, you'll notice that coming from the inside of the tuner, I have a couple of wires, test wires coming out that lead up to my my voltage meter. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to do is check the voltage at a couple test points in there that feed voltage to that indicator lamp, or indicator LED in this case, to see if there's voltage present when we're locked on to a radio station. So we'll follow those wires up to the meter and take a look. So let me change views. Okay, so we're looking at the face of the meter, obviously, but we're showing about 13.5 volts, okay, 13.51, 50, whatever. So anyways, you'll notice if I tune off of that station that we just listened to briefly, then we're going to lose that voltage that you see there. See, it drops away. That's because we're tuning off of the station and we're losing that stereo signal. All right, because remember, I'm clipped onto the test points that or terminals that feed voltage via a couple of wires to that LED or that lamp that should light up. Okay, so that shows us that when I tune back on, we have our 13.5 volts to light up that LED. So we know that it's working. Okay, so when I replace that LED then with a new one, the new one's going to light up, showing us that we have FM stereo, our stereo indicator light. So hopefully to the customer that's clear. Okay, so let me go ahead and change views once again. Also too, is the dial face lighting up? It's kind of hard to tell because of all the lights that are on. So let me go ahead and shut off some lights here in the shop and come back and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so everything's all dark and scary in here, and yeah, we have our dial face lit up, turned off, turned on, turned off, turned on. Okay, so let me go ahead and get the lights back on. Okay, so we know everything is working. It's pulling in stations. We visualized it on the scope, the signals. We heard it on the little test amp, and off camera I tuned around the dial. It's doing good. It's pulling in stations. The sensitivity seems to be good enough. So I'm not going to go into recommending an alignment, tuner alignment and peaking things and all that. If this unit was pretty deaf and it wasn't pulling things in, and the signals were weak and it just wasn't pulling in stations good, then I would recommend that. But I don't want to hit the customer with too much, because number one, for budget reasons, number two, my own schedule. I only have so much time that I can spend working on this stuff, especially if there isn't any real imminent problems or immediate problems that just absolutely have to be dealt with. Okay, so once I wrap up the final evaluations of all of this Pioneer equipment, and I only have one more to go, the cassette deck is coming up next, then I'll just do a quick summary of what needs to be done, and key word, needs to be done. But other than that, I'm not going to eat up too much time here. So let me go ahead and get to the cassette deck. Okay, and now for the Pioneer CT-F615 cassette deck. Now this one is not doing so good, and I'm going to point out what's going on. It powers up. The safe power up was fine. Nothing was trying to short out or anything like that. But as far as mechanically, we've got problems. So let me go ahead and hover the camera over the top there, and I'll show you what's going on. Okay, so let me explain what's going on. I'm going to keep it simple for the customer, but in a nutshell, the worst thing that's going on in here that I'm aware of, or that appears to be the worst thing anyways, because, well, let me just mention that the motor here is kaput. Okay, now it doesn't mean that the motor can't be replaced if I'm able to source a good quality replacement, and they're usually out there. They can be had. Also too, I want to mention that the belts need to be replaced. The belts have turned into, let me get a little pointer. So first of all, let me just point out, you might be able to just barely catch the edge of this plastic pulley that's extending from the motor shaft. There's a pulley there that accommodates two belts. Don't worry about what they're for and all that stuff, but anyways, the belts that come off of these two pulleys on the shaft, one goes over here to this flywheel that's obviously crucial to the function of this deck, to say the least. Okay, this flywheel here, and you can see where the belt was positioned, and then there's this other pulley here that has a belt extending off of it that goes down to the same pulley. So the belts have turned into something that we really hate, and yeah, it's turned into, these belts have turned into a nasty black goo. So the significance of that, not that that can't be remedied, but it's the amount of cleanup, because when those black belts turn into goo, I have to break things down a little bit further than I normally would in order to have better access to the mechanisms, pulleys, and all that involved in the belt path. Okay, so in order to clean up everything real good, there's a lot of cleaning involved, solvents and all that to get all that goo out of there, and then apply the new belts. Okay. So normally in this deck, just based on what I can see, just kind of glancing around, normally if these belts hadn't turned to goo and we had a good working motor, then it would be a matter of just maneuvering the belts in there and applying the new belts, installing the new belts. Because it doesn't look like there's very much, if any, disassembly involved on this deck in order to put new belts on. At least not that I see. It looks like a pretty clear shot. So some decks, there is some disassembly to, gain access to replace belts and all that, but not so much here. But being that, again, these have turned to black goo, then I would want to pull things apart a bit, clean things out a little bit better and all that. But that's provided we had, a good motor and all that to start with, then belt replacement wouldn't be a big deal. And then from there, with a good motor and belts, I can function test this unit further to see if there's other stuff going on with the mechanism or mechanisms, collectively speaking. So for example, everything looks like it wants to work. So the only thing I had to remove was this plate here with these two solenoids. I had to peel that back to get a better look down in here and check out the belts and all that. Now, if you notice, these solenoids are working under the control of, the control switches on the front here. So that circuitry is working, that controls the solenoids. Also too, and let me reposition the camera, this is our tape path in here. So when you drop a cassette in there, this is the path that the tape moves across. The heads, and then there's a cap stand that lifts up and engages with the pinch roller. That's, of course, an important function, crucial function. Without it, there wouldn't be no function. So, this wouldn't play tapes. So the point I'm getting at is that this whole assembly here, known as the head, the head assembly, head base assembly, whatever, lifts into position. When the cassette is dropped down in there, the door is closed, and you press play, or record and all that. This lifts into position. So it's doing that. Let me demonstrate that. So it's lifting, and then I can deactivate it, and you can even see the solenoid back here. Okay, engaging and disengaging and all that. So that seems to be okay, which shows me that at least the parts of the mechanism that I just showed you seem to be engaging. They don't seem to be stuck and all that. But that doesn't mean that if I was able to source a motor and put the new belts on and clean up all that goo. See, that's the thing too that adds more time and time, labor, and all that to the equation, and then sourcing, installing a new motor. So paying for that is one thing, but that doesn't guarantee the rest of the function of this unit in order to get it working reliably, and that's the thing. If you're going to dump money into this, the work needs to be done right. In order to do the work right, there's a lot involved. And I haven't touched on other adjustments that may very likely be necessary. So sometimes in an old deck like this that's multiple decades old, sometimes a person can dodge a bullet, replace the belts and all that, and clean the tape path a bit, and you're off to the races. It'll work. But the million-dollar question in my world is, for how long? And there you go. So if you're wanting a reliable deck, I can't guarantee that even if I source a motor and clean up the black goo and put new belts on here, that there isn't going to be other issues that need to be resolved. I wouldn't know that unless I had a good working motor, the belts in place, and then I start testing things a little further and see what adjustments likely would have to be made. There's other mechanical adjustments that have to be performed in order for everything to be working optimally. Okay, mechanical adjustments. And then there's also electrical adjustments too. So when you add all that together to produce a good, solid, reliable working deck that's working to factory specification or as close as possible, well, you know, that's time and money. So the way things stand right now, I don't feel good about just, unless you, the customer, are wanting to go quite a bit deeper, which is going to equate to a pretty expensive repair on this, and you know, all the restorative work and again mechanical adjustment and electrical adjustment and all that, then unless you're really attached to this unit, you know, it has a lot of sentimental value, or you have other reasons you want this thing working, regardless of the cost, I would say, you know, enough is enough on this. So one thing I will point out real quick in regard to the motor, you can see I have these test probes attached to some test points that I'm reading some voltage off of, and let me change the camera position here. Okay, so if you look at our meter, we have a little over 13 volts right about there, and we should have rotation of that motor. So let me go ahead and change our camera position once again. Okay, and again, you know, this is where I'm reading that voltage. I'm picking off that voltage, which is what feeds the motor right here. Okay, you can see the wiring there. That's extending down to those test points that I'm clipped to. So we have full voltage. That motor should be moving and a grooving. Okay, so you know, the lights are on, but no one's home. It's kaput. And yeah, I checked to see if the you know, if the shaft was seized up on the motor, and it's rotating, so there should be some life, and there you go. Those motors give out here and there. You know, it's not uncommon, it's not a rare thing, a rare occurrence, but you know, anyways, like I said, in closing on this one, the costs involved to go in and really do a proper servicing, strip the mechanism to at least some degree, to clean the mechanism, re-lubricate the mechanism as needed, where needed, you know, and perform various mechanical adjustments and electrical adjustments would be, in my opinion, cost prohibitive for as far as this deck is concerned, unless the customer has a really good reason she wants to have this deck preserved and is willing to put, you know, bigger money into it. So that's where I'm going to leave it with the evaluations that I've done thus far on all this equipment. And let me just kind of summarize before I call it. So we saw with the turntable that I obviously need to replace the stylus. I need to clean those controls, the speed controls and all that, go inside and clean it up a little bit while I'm in there servicing the controls, the speed controls and whatnot. Maybe give it a good internal cleaning where I can reach based on accessibility. Maybe apply a little bit of re-lubrication, a little bit of lubrication, also where I can access things. And that's going to depend too on the state of the lubricant that's in there. If it looks okay overall, you know, I'm not going to worry about it, okay? Because I'm just trying to get this stuff out the door and just get it functioning for the customer. Unless there's something really bad going on. But otherwise, I think the turntable is just fine. provided that I just clean it up a bit, get those controls serviced, get a stylus on board. I believe the customer will be able to use it and it will go on for some time. The amplifier, as we saw, we had good output. We had good symmetrical output on both channels. We saw from the waveforms. So when that thing is hooked up to speakers, I believe it'll be just fine. Once I get those controls serviced, because remember, we saw how dirty all those controls were. They were very staticky. We were looking at the scope and we saw that static in the waveforms. So, you know, we know that those controls really need a good servicing. And also too, my recommendation as far as recapping would be in the power supply and that main amplifier section. But if not the amplifier section, at least that power supply would be a good idea. But even then, it's working right now. So if the customer wants to take it and just use it as is, who knows? The amp may work for some time. I have no way of knowing for sure when it's going to fail. At some point, yeah, those electrolytics, they eventually poop the bed, they go away, but who knows when that'll be? I can't say. Everything's working other than those controls being really dirty. So if I get it all cleaned up and get those controls serviced, then it's usable as is. If you want a little more future proofing, then we should start with that power supply, as I already said. And if you want to go a little bit beyond that, we should recap the main amplifier section of that unit, because those are the areas, the power supply and the amplifier section, that undergo the most electrical wear and tear. Okay, so there's that. And that tuner, we already saw that. That's doing pretty good. I'm going to clean that out a little bit if I get the green light on all this equipment, and replace that LED, the stereo indicator. But otherwise it's working, it's pulling in stations. It seems to be doing so with fairly good sensitivity. So there's that. And then this right here, I think we should just call it, and there you go. So I'm going to end it here, guys, and as I always say, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, y'all take care.
This has been a Spinning Head production.